Welcome back. I hope you're ready for Chapter 8. In Chapter 8, we're going to be talking about interpersonal communications. So many of you may have taken a communications course as an elective or as you moved forward with your degree, and those are certainly going to go into a lot more detail. This is just a chapter in this book, so but we will go through it kind of quickly because there's again a lot of this material is found in other places. But I do want to touch base on a few things. Interpersonal communication is very, very important to emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is interpersonal communications and intrapersonal communications. So our ability to understand and communicate within ourselves, like I'm getting anxious, I'm getting upset, I need a break, and our ability to communicate with others. So that has a big impact on our ability to adjust and to have good emotional intelligence, which is a big factor in happiness. So we do want to touch base on some of these things. One thing to understand is that we communicate differently, and that's okay. All of us communicate differently, and we use different channels when we communicate. So some people communicate with their hands, some people communicate more with nonverbal, verbal behaviors. There's a lot of different things that are happening at the same time. And when we communicate, there's two different things that are happening. We've got the sender who's sending a message, and hopefully it's a clear one, but if it's not clear, then that causes problems, and the receiver who's receiving the information. And in between there's often a lot of stuff. So stuff could be things like, I don't understand the language, I don't understand maybe an accent, a lot of other noise, background noise. I was just on a conference call today, and there was a lot of background, like a clicking kind of noise, kind of like technology clicking noise that was interfering with my ability to hear some things. Background like can be in our head, like we're really not focused, we're really not listening, we're really not interested. So those things can all interfere with communication. Technology comes in play here, and it's got a lot of pros and cons. The pros are we have so much available, and it's getting better and better every day. You're watching me, on a video, so you don't have to just read your book. You can also communicate with us. You can text people. You can email people. We can call people. We can FaceTime people. These things were, TV. I remember being a kid seeing like what the world might look like, and now it's there. You know what I mean? I've seen in some of these home shows where you can have a screen in your your desk could light up and it'd be like sitting beside a person. You know what I mean? And so it's going to get better and better. The difficulty is we now communicate differently. So we use a lot of, LOLs and jargons in brief statements, and some people don't translate between the two of them very well. So they go from text to email, or they get lost in that processing, and messages can get lost that way because we change chains. So there's pros and cons to all of that. The good news is we can communicate with more people more readily, more faster. One of the bad news is it can be completely overwhelming, the amount of information that we filter through. So we have tons of information that we want, plus all that spam and nonsense that people send us that we don't want. So there's a lot of stuff coming at us at any given time. When we look at nonverbal communication, and even here in these videos, you are still seeing some nonverbal communication. You probably see my hand flying up there a bit. You see if I'm smiling or not smiling. You're going to look at facial expressions. You're still even going to get that even though I'm not face-to-face with you. So it helps to convey emotions. It helps us to address the multi-channel. So I'm hearing the words, but I'm also matching them with their expressions. It helps when things are ambiguous. Like if they say a word like, my daughter is only 8 and she understands sarcasm, but if she doesn't see my face sometimes, like if I'm not facing her, she'll go, is that sarcastic? Like, did you really mean that? So things like that can be relayed easier that way. And especially when, again, sarcasm, things that seem to be contradicting messages. We do a lot of that in the American language. We say things we don't really mean, or we use terms that don't make sense. And also helps us to interpret those things again with culture and things like that. So we have slang and just sayings that taken literally don't necessarily mean what we're trying to relay. So that's important. Another thing that we don't always look at with nonverbal communication are things like personal space. How much distance we give to a person. If we're very distant or move away from them, we might feel uncomfortable. Moving towards them might show a tenderness, but it also could be cultural. So there's reasons that could happen. Some cultures just have closer personal boundaries, and some touch more than others. That just happens. Eye contact, again, in the United States, we tend to value eye contact and seek it out, but there are some cultures where that would be considered inappropriate or even challenging, so you won't see that from them. Body language, how we posture, if we stand above somebody in an authority figure, or are we at their level? I know, as working in a managerial role for many years, there were many times where I could see an employee was in distress, and even though they said, can I talk to you? I may have been standing, and immediately I would look at their nonverbal language and go, I probably should sit down. They've got something to say, and I need them to feel like they're on a good footing to do so, and so I'm not so intimidating at that time. And then touch. Again, it can be tenderness if it's concern, particularly with a child or anybody. Are you doing okay? A tap on the shoulder or something like that. Of course, making sure it's appropriate. It can relay a lot when somebody needs, it's just really sending that message, even a touch of the hand or something like that. We also use nonverbal communication to look at deception, trying to look at if we think people are telling us the truth. Your book talks a little bit about how to find a liar. It's not foolproof. There used to be a show on it. It's not absolute, but there are some things. A lot of them are knowing that person, because that helps a lot. Unfortunately, liars are usually pretty good at it, so that they're kind of tough. So you could be good at determining them. The better you know them, the better. Frequently, liars won't say too much. They say little because they don't want to offer too much detail that they could be challenged in. They do tend to blink less. And because of the programming, it's not automatic. It's a deliberate thing. And lies are often sometimes higher pitched in speaking, and sometimes a little bit briefer. They also tend to be inconsistent, or can be inconsistent, with their facial and body language, because they're processing the information differently than experiencing it. For that reason, because it's inconsistent, that's why we see that polygraphs are often inadmissible. It doesn't mean that they don't get any information, but they could be getting other information, such as if you're nervous. It could be picking up on your nervousness than the lie, or it could be like if you're looking, I remember a case where they were looking for, they thought a grandfather might have been involved in a missing child, and he showed to be lying, and he was just trying to cover up a criminal history that he never told his family about from 40 years prior. So he never told his family, so he was embarrassed, and he was showing reactions that were real, but he was not involved in that event. But the test did indicate that he had been lying, but his lies were not about that event. So they can be difficult. Not something you couldn't use, just I wouldn't put a baby in that basket. We also often tend to overestimate how good of a communicator we are. Not almost all, but many people say, yeah, I'm a good communicator. They believe that. That may not be what the receivers are getting from them. So if you had other people, that's a better judge of how you're communicating, to see how they're receiving it. Do they feel that the messages are clear? So a lot of us give ourselves a little more credit than we deserve. But many people are great communicators, so that's good too. When we look at conversation skills, some things that will help us and help us to build those bridges between other people is to make sure we give attention and respect to the person that we're talking to. Make sure that they feel that they're important and valued and liked. To focus on the person and not themselves. So how are you doing? I don't want to come greet somebody just so I can tell them all about myself. It has to be a mutual exchange, and I have to show a genuine interest in them. Use of nonverbal language, such as smiling, nodding, those kind of things can help. Making nice comments. That's, I like that outfit. You look nice today. The proverbial, how's the weather? But the more specific, the more detailed, that can help a lot too. Introducing yourselves. Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. I seen you around the block. Maybe you're your neighbor, and I keep seeing you. I want to take a minute to introduce myself. Talking about common subjects. So if it's a neighbor around the block you're introducing yourself to, how's your lawn doing? Mine's really dry. I'm just making that up, but you're finding something that you have in common with that neighbor. I heard that there's a community party next week. Have you ever been to one of those? Can you tell me a little bit about it? So making it a easy way to get the conversation ball rolling, because you're relatable. You have something in common with them. And end the conversation politely. It was very nice to meet you. I look forward to seeing you again, that kind of thing. So the person leaves you with a positive experience. Self-disclosure is a good thing, sharing a little bit about yourself, but self-disclosure should be mutual. So if you came up to that neighbor or that new person you met or that new employee or whatever, don't share everything. At least don't share everything at once. You share a little bit, they share a little bit. So you share a little bit. I see you're married. I've been married too. Do you have any kids? Maybe stop there. See what they're willing to share. And then kind of the next time you say, hey, Jim, nice to see you again. I heard there was an Easter egg hunt, in this other place. I know you have kids that are, young age. Have you seen anything about it? And build those relationship skills from there. Understand that other people can be nervous too, meeting strangers, so you're going to be working with that. One of the biggest fears in the United States is public speaking, so just because you see somebody nervous doesn't mean that they don't have a lot of really good things to say, just that they may be also processing their nerves. One of the hardest things in the world to do is to unscare somebody. So if they come with that natural fear of public speaking, you might be picking up on that as well. And also to be aware of things that are barriers to good communication, communicating at a bad time, communicating in a noisy environment, communicating with somebody that when they feel attacked, if you're coming across and that you're going to turn them into defensive, you did, that kind of thing. Ambushing them or sneaking up on them when they're not prepared for something rather than scheduling a time if it's a difficult conversation especially, or really showing that you're not all that interested in what they have to say. It isn't ever a good thing. When we talk about interpersonal conflicts and ways to help with that, some of the things that we do find that people do, it creates conflict. One is to avoid the conflict. Again, sometimes that can be okay if it doesn't really matter, but we want to be aware of it if that's a problem. If you take the cultural psychology of conflict, that class is going to have a lot of this information. So definitely we're going to talk about that in detail in that class. Also accommodating, just kind of giving in. It doesn't really matter that much. So I'm going to go along with the flow. It's no big deal. Competing or force, I have the power and I'm going to push my power on you because I said so. I can do that, so I can force you into whatever I want. Compromising, saying, I know you've got something invested, I got something invested, can we do something, how can we work together to an end that we can both be okay with? And collaboration is working together. So those are all great ways that we can try to deal with conflicts. Other things that we should be doing, again, is being open and honest. It's very difficult to deal with a conflict if we don't really know where the other person's coming from. Making sure that we're focused on the problem and not the person. Being sure to avoid words that upset or escalate people and focus on the problem. Make sure that we are empathetic to the other person and where they are at and what they need, and that we use assertive styles when possible instead of authoritarian ones, meaning that you have value and I have value, and together we need to come up with a solution that works. And I may or may not be able to do what you say, or maybe we need to work together, but I definitely want to hear your thoughts and your ideas. And not only does it make for better conflict resolution, it builds better relationships. Better relationships allow us to build better conflict resolution in the future. So it builds on itself. So I hope you enjoyed that chapter. We'll be back very soon and we'll be looking at chapter 9. See you soon.